Hey everyone, this is Luis Estrela from Nintendo Everything, and today we have a very special and different video. We are not going to be exactly like the usual video that you are used to watching the channel, where I talk about something, where I make up points with editing and all that stuff. It's actually more of a discussion, but it's a very special discussion because it's about a series that I love, that I really love. And if you guys follow the channel, you're probably aware that I'm a big fan of Xenoblade. And that's why I decided to make this discussion where me, and I'm not alone here of course because it's a discussion, me and my friend Nicholas, you probably already know Nicholas if you follow our podcast. We are going to talk about the Xenoblade series, the first and the second game, and of course about the third game that is soon coming out. Now, be alerted that this is a discussion with a lot of spoilers. We are going to talk about everything that we know about the series. So if you never played, if you never finished Xenoblade 1 or Xenoblade 2, this is probably not the video for you. Maybe if you already watched someone playing or if you watched the cutscenes, but if you are not aware of the story, I highly recommend you play the game first. So, Nicholas, let's start with you. First, of course, present yourself, say hello, but after that I want you to tell how was your first experience with Xenoblade? How you discovered the series, which was your first game? I mean, your first experience in general.
Right, yeah, so thanks for having me, Louise. I'm Nicholas. I work as a writer on the Nintendo Everything site. My first experience with the series was back in 2014. I had gotten the original Xenoblade Chronicles for Wii, and I played a little bit of it and not enjoyed it too much just because it was a very different game in terms of the mechanics, the combat. It wasn't something I was very much used to. So it didn't click with me right away and I stopped playing it pretty quickly, but I got back into it when I saw a YouTuber I follow, Chugga Conroy, who I think is fairly well known in the community, made his Let's Play on Xenoblade Chronicles, and that made me give the game a second shot. And I played it all the way through and I absolutely loved it. It blew me away. It was one of my first introductions to RPGs, and it really showed me just how games can compete with other medium in terms of being an art form.
Just a question. I wonder how many people actually got in the series thanks to Chugga Conroy, because I listen to that everywhere.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's done a huge. He's done fantastic work with the series and helping people get into it. Yeah. After that, I moved on. I played X when it came out a year later, and I played through Xenoblade 2 in 2017. Was really happy with the game, was really happy with the connections that were established with Xenoblade 1. And overall, I mean, the franchise has become one of, if not my favorite franchises. I've played Xenoblade Chronicles, Future Connected, Xenoblade 2, and Torna to 100% now, so.
Have you ever played Xenoblade Chronicles X?
Yes, I did play X when it came out in 2015. I did not do everything in terms of side quests and whatnot, but I did beat it, and I hope we get a resolution to its story one day.
Oh yeah, totally. And have you ever played Xenogears or Xenosaga?
Sadly, no. I don't have much experience with Gears or Saga. I know a little bit about them, but I've never played them myself.
Yeah, sadly those games are really hard to actually get access to them nowadays, because they should get a remaster or a remake, but it seems that Square and Bandai Namco are not very interested in that.
Yeah, desperately hoping for an HD 2D Xenogears.
Yeah, but from what I heard of your story, I think a lot of people can relate to that, in the sense that Chugga Conroy influencing you to actually got into the series, and because it's a series that sometimes you experience for the first time and you don't actually get it, why it's so good. A little push in the right direction is always very welcome, and I think that's why he influenced so many people. Actually, my story is quite different, because I started being a Nintendo fan around 2010, 2011, so more or less when the first Xenoblade was launching on the Wii. But at the time, I was still discovering games like Zelda, Mario Galaxy. I was still getting to know the first team of Nintendo. So Xenoblade never actually. I don't even remember if I saw something related to Xenoblade at that time. So my first contact with the series was actually in the E3 of 2013, where there was a trailer for Xenoblade Chronicles X. And I don't know if you remember that trailer, but there's no way that you see a trailer like that and it doesn't get stuck in your mind, because it's
Right,
so
yeah.
crazy how big the world was and how impressive. I didn't know anything about the series, about the game, but I was immediately interested just because the visuals was so impressive. It looked like a huge adventure. So when I think Xenoblade Chronicles X came out 2 years after that trailer in the US, and then I immediately bought it. And the same thing that happened with you. I played the game. I enjoyed what I saw, but it was so complex, so complicated, and the story on Xenoblade Chronicles X is a little on the slow side. So I liked the game, but I didn't finish it. I think I must have played like, I don't know, maybe 20%. I didn't even get the scales, so it was really early. Yeah. And the game really felt complicated, the menus, everything, so many tags, so many things, and I was not very used to playing JRPGs, so that was a huge problem also. But then in 2017, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced, and that was actually the first Xenoblade that I've played from beginning to end, and then I actually fell in love with the series. I knew from people, when the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced, I saw a lot of people comment, oh, this is the kind of game that we wanted, because nowadays, Xenoblade Chronicles X, everyone loves the game. Everyone says that X is the best one, but at the time that it came out, people were very disappointed because it was really different from the first one. It was not like so focused on the story like the first Xenoblade. So when 2 was announced, people were with expectations that it would be more similar with the first Xenoblade. And it actually was. When we talk about the structure of the worlds of the game, it's not actually so open worlds, where it's more of open areas that you explore on a linear style. And I
also ended up being far more connected just story-wise than anyone thought it would
be. I think nowadays we can clearly see that Xenoblade Chronicles X is like a different series. I mean, I will not doubt that in the future they may connect something, because this is not something that they wouldn't do, but for now it seems that it is a different series, even though it has some similarities like the combat and some of the aspects of exploration. But I think Xenoblade Chronicles 2 also caught my attention because it was really colorful on the not exactly the anime style, but everything was more colorful than Xenoblade Chronicles X, which was a very gray game. Like it had more of a feeling like an actually science fiction. While
it was
Xenoblade,
a bit more vibrant, for sure.
Xenoblade 2 looks way more like fantasy. Although talking about Xenoblade, we know that at the end of the day, those games are more like science fiction because of the whole stuff that we see at the end. And this was something that blew my mind when I got to the end of the game in the World 3. And then I realized, wait, this is all technology. And then comes the scene and we see that this was made in our world. And I was... it was completely crazy. It's something interesting, because if you play 2 and then you play 1 after, like I did, the connection still makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Because both games.
I have to wonder how that was.
No, it was like with me the problem was I saw the ending of Xenoblade 2. I saw that scene with Claus making the experiments, and of course I didn't know that Xenoblade 1 had the same scene. But the moments that I search about the ends of Xenoblade 2 on the internet, I immediately saw that Xenoblade 1 had the same ending. So when I got to play Xenoblade 1, I already knew that the connection existed. So sadly, I did not have that moment in the game of realizing the connection. I already knew about that because the internet is like that. I'm guilty of this because I like to search a lot. After I finish something, I like to search for theories, for discussions. So that was a problem for me. Yeah. But it didn't really matter much because I think Xenoblade 1 stands as its stories, as much as Xenoblade 2 also has its own story. So the connection is something nice, is something cool, but if you play those games separately, you enjoy them no matter what. Maybe...
Yeah, for the most part, I just thought it was going to be like, hey, here you go, this is just a random connection, and that's all we get. Like, these games are just, tangentially related, but that's as far as it's gonna go. And lo and behold.
No, it's really clever the way that they did it. And usually I recommend people to play it first, now that we have a remake, first Xenoblade 1, then 2, because I think Xenoblade 2 actually makes that scene way more powerful. Because on Xenoblade 1, Zanza is kind of a villain without much of a development. Like, he's a villain, he's bad, but you don't know a lot about him. So that scene is kind of like, okay, he's bad, he's doing bad things. And on Xenoblade 2 has a whole different context where the world is ending and he's trying to save the universe, making this experiment. And then his character in the game, Klaus, the architect, is not actually a bad person, which is something really cool, because in JRPGs, usually God is a bad person. You usually kill gods at the end.
Right.
So that was a nice twist. But okay, already talked about my experience. Now I think we can easily enter in the differences between Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. You don't have to answer that, but I have to to question you. Which one do you prefer? The first Xenoblade or the second one?
It has to be the first one. I mean, a huge part of that is just because it was my first one, and that's always going to stick with you, so...
Yeah. I mean, when you have the first experience with those games that are so strong, you have a connection of nostalgia, a connection of all the emotions that you felt at the moments. For the same reason, Xenoblade 2 is my favorite one, because even though if you gave me those two games and you ask me, oh, make a review of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, I'll probably give a higher note to Xenoblade 1 because I think it's a more well-rounded game. But Xenoblade 2 is the game that really grabs my heart. I love the characters, I love the story so much, I love the music, the areas, everything is so ingrained in my brain that I simply love the game. But at the same time, sometimes I really like to watch some Let's Play of these games, and every time that I see the story of Xenoblade 1 again, I'm always so impressed by how amazing is what they did on the Wii era, with the story, with the cutscenes, with the VA is so amazing, the voices of the characters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what they did with Xenoblade 1 is honestly crazy. I mean, we talk about it, like people talk about all the time how that game almost feels wasted on the Wii because they did so much for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. Like you said, the VA work, I'm sure the Japanese VA work is fantastic as well, but speaking from experience, the English VA was done so well. Shulk's voice actor, Adam Howden, absolutely killed the role. Everyone else did a very good job as well. Just the game... It was also something new for Nintendo in general. They hadn't produced that many big RPGs. I mean, prior to Xenoblade, the last JRPG they released was probably Golden Sun, I think. That was a while ago.
True. I always say that what I like about Monolith Soft is that they bring something that Nintendo don't have usually. Yeah. Which is those games with a mega story, connected story in this case, because Nintendo don't like to connect this game so much. And Xenoblade really feels like a little bit out of the curve in a good way. And it's really amazing to have this kind of content in a Nintendo console. But I agree with you, I think Xenoblade 1 was way bigger than the Wii. And thank God we received the definitive edition, which to me makes the game so much better because
it's so good.
Yeah, you can see the emotions on the characters' faces. They really did a good job.
And they did so much between the models, revamping the menus, the quest systems, the guiding system, adding an epilogue, reused content that was cut from the original.
It really was an amazing... It was not a full remake, but the work that they did was so good that it felt like a full remake, at least when I played.
Even the music they remade, which they really did not have to do at all, because the original music was fantastic. But
the first Xenoblade has music from Yoko Shimomura, which is one of the most famous composers for JRPGs, and her work is just amazing. And... yeah, I think the first Xenoblade is a really easy game to talk good things about it. I think the scene where it's revealed that Zanza is in the body of Shulk and that Dixon is a traitor and all that stuff, which gives the game a total 360 on the story. I think that's probably the best cutscene in a game that I've ever seen. Like a cutscene from beginning to end that really changes the whole game, and it impresses you with everything. The music, the VA, the dialogue, everything so well written, so well thought. And it's something that since the beginning of the game, characters are foreshadowing that this will happen, but you can never guess something like that. It's funny to see people playing Xenoblade, because sometimes they start to create theories and they start to think that they understand the story. Because if you understand about stories, about structure, you probably can guess that Fiora's not dead and that Moonkar is Metal Face. I see people easily getting those points.
Yeah, those are not too bad.
Yeah. But the plot twist of Zanza actually being the body of Shulk, and that this world that they are living is a simulation of the real world, I never saw anyone getting this. Like, it's totally impossible to guess something like that, but it's something that when it happens, you're like, oh my god, it makes total sense.
Yeah, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Like, there's genuinely plot points established that lead into this naturally, which is just crazy. Like, it's the story, I mean, in Xenoblade 1, but also 2, like, both games have such fantastic narratives.
Yeah. I think there's a scene, like, really at the beginning of the game where Shulk says something along the lines of, I hear two voices in my head.
Yeah. when telling me to kill all of them.
Exactly.
Like, oh my god. Yeah.
It's nice because it makes it really fun to replay the game, because you start to see all those details that you didn't see in the first playthrough. It's really great. And Xenoblade 2, on the other hand, although I think that Xenoblade 2 has some similarities on the plot to the first one, even the plot twist of being an artificial world and all that stuff, but I think the Xenoblade 2 is way more focused on the characters, not exactly on the plot. And I mean, the characters on the first game are amazing, but I think that the characters on Xenoblade 2, I think it's a game, like people say that it really looks like an anime, Xenoblade 2, but I think that's not only in the sense of the looks of the game, but the progression. I feel like I'm watching seasons of an anime.
Yeah.
With each chapter, because there's always a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter, and then there are those characters moments that it's not something like an action moment, but it's just a moment where characters are having a conversation and you can actually see how they are feeling, what they are talking about, how they go about in their lives. And for me, it was really amazing to see something like that in a video game. You know, it's not about the action scenes only, but also about those more introspective moments where there are characters talking about their lives, talking about how they feel about the world. So for me, I think the biggest draw in the second game in Xenoblade 2 was actually the characters. I'm a huge defender of Rex. I know a lot of people hate Rex, and I think a lot of people hate him because of the VA sometimes, because
I mean,
the direction sometimes gets a little weird.
Yeah, it's complicated because the voice acting in 2 is like, I always think that the voice acting in 2 is like 95% good, if not great. It's just that the 5% where it's not great, it's pretty bad, and that's just a shame. It's also not the voice actor's fault, but
I mean, there are moments that I really don't understand, like at the end of the first chapter, you have those screens from Rex where he says, and
sounds like a race car,
Yeah, and then it happens like 3 or 2 times, and I'm like, what the hell? Why didn't re-record it to me? I mean, it's really weird to see that. It really seems like it was something rushed, you know? And I know that the actor that did Rex is amazing, because there's a scene by the end of the game. It's the scene where, at the end of this scene, we can actually hear Shulk's voice coming out of the void. And there's this scene where Rex is talking to Malus, and he's shouting, he's screaming, he's explaining his motivation, and it's so amazing. Like, the VA really delivers at the end of the game. But then we have those scenes, and I think it doesn't help that Xenoblade 2 has more anime screens than the first Xenoblade. The first Xenoblade had a lot, but I think Xenoblade 2 has even more moments like this. And I think the direction of the VAs really got lost. We have to remember that I think Xenoblade 1, the VA was made after the game launched on Japan, right? Or no?
Yeah, because the game released in Japan, I think in 2010, I want to say. It only came to the West in like 2011. They arguably they might have had more time for it.
I think
so.
I don't know where I heard that, but I heard somewhere that Adam Howden, that made Shook, he actually watched some of the scenes to get how he should actually portray Shook, which makes total sense because
Yeah,
his work was amazing in that game.
So good.
But yeah, I think both games are like amazing. But if we were to talk about some flaws, I would say that yes, Xenoblade 2 has some that has some real flaws, and we know that some of them are related to how the game was developed because Monolith was not with their full team. So like I don't know what's your opinion on that, but we have like the gacha elements of the core crystals, and we have like a system. Really, the whole game really seems to be like there's this whole system of the skill trees of the blades, and everything is really hard to get to 100%. I know that you 100% Xenoblade 2, so that's really interesting. And
it took 400 hours, so yeah. it definitely wasn't. But I think
it was fun to do that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's
the game just has it's difficult because it's not a bad game, not by any means. It's a great game, but there's just elements to it that feel rushed in some way. Like one of the bigger things for me is the UI. Just the inventory systems, the way you navigate around the menus seems a little unnecessary, a little bit too messy. The fact that all the inventory is in a list. Yeah, it's a little bit messy, which I think is partly because they had, like you said, they had a big portion of their team off on Breath of the Wild. I think they've said that they had 3 UI designers left, or 3 people working on the UI, so they didn't have a lot. And the gacha system it's an experiment. Personally, I'm glad that it doesn't look like it's coming back in 3, although I never really had a huge problem with it in 2. I feel like it always gave you enough to do whatever you need to do. It never completely blocked your progress. Yeah. But I also don't feel like it added much. It added some replayability, but for the most part, I think Rare Blades would have been done better if you just obtained all of them through relevant quests, like you did with Praxis and Theory.
Yeah, I see a lot of people complaining about the gacha system and field skills, saying that the game halts your progress on something lucky based. No. But I don't agree with that because there's really I don't remember how much, but there's rarely a case where skill fields are necessary to progress in the story.
Yeah,
and
most
usually,
of the time they're tied to the story blades.
Yeah, exactly. Usually you don't have to go out of your way to get a lot of other blades. I don't think if you don't want to make gacha in the whole game, I don't think it's really necessary. You can make just some random blades and do the game easily. And I think, and there's always another point. When I'm watching people play this game in live streams, the gacha moments in live streams is so hype. Everyone loves it because
it's true. Yeah.
Because first, it's free, so it's not like a game like Genshin Impact where the streamer has to actually pay for it.
It could be a lot worse.
People just love gambling. It's something that people just love to make bets and to know which one of the blades will be available. And it's so fun that they made this thing of hiring a different artist for its blades because they are so different.
Yes.
It's really cool to get a blade with a very interesting look. I mean, some of them are really weird. But at the same time, I understand that this was kind of the whole point. I think Takahashi said in our interview that he did not give anything. He did not say anything. Just said to the artist, draw whatever you want, make whatever character you want, and then we come out with so many crazy and amazing characters. And in that topic, you are talking about how the game feels rushed. And I completely agree with you, but at the same time, there's so much content here. It's kind of crazy. Like the blades have specific side quests for story with VA, full side stories, and then you have so much stuff to do on the world. So many little quests, merc missions, a lot of different things to do in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's fun to actually do 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the game, Yeah, when I mean rush, I'm thinking more along the lines of things like UI, tutorials, that kind of the stuff you would build around the
Yeah,
core content of the game, because the core content is very much complete. You're not missing anything out. Like you said, every blade had like there's so much voice acting, so many quests, so many voice acted quests.
yeah.
The heart to hearts, like there's a lot to it. To some extent, I would say that some of it isn't necessary per se.
Agree,
Like I
agree,
don't
agree.
know if the Merc missions were really necessary
If
to
they
add to
add
the
a
game.
lot.
Yeah. Just a few little things like that where I feel like probably could have been cut. But yeah, the game is. I mean, there's more than enough to do in it, and it is fun to do. There's no arguing that.
Yeah, I think the problem sometimes in the case of being too much, sometimes I remember I was playing the game and I wanted something simple. Let's say I want my character to walk faster in the overworld. And then I go to the internet. How can I do that? And then I have to
Alright.
raise the development level. I have to make mark mission. I have to make this side stuff. And there's so much stuff to make just
It's a
to
little
get this one
complex.
thing. Yes, yes. But when you are in the minds of I want to complete it, it's actually quite fun to make all these activities, and you are already in the loop of making it again and again and again, that you actually can enjoy that process. And
Yeah,
then
if you enjoy marking off a checklist,
yeah.
it's really fun to do, I guess.
More on that, exactly. No, but I completely understand when you say that the game was rushed in the sense that they didn't cut the content, but the way that they actually implemented it could be done with more thought, could be done in a better way if they had more time and more people working on the game. So I think it was more a problem of the scope of the game being bigger than what they could actually achieve.
That's the other thing is it's admittedly not really their fault because they also had like a split development team on
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild. I'm sure that if the game had either if they hadn't had that split in the development team, or say in the future if we get a Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition, there's a lot of these problems that they're going to fix. And honestly, at that point, I don't think I'd have too many more complaints left about the game.
Yeah, true, true. No, I completely agree. Still in that topic of the difference between those games, just I think to finish this, a more controversial topic. A lot of people say that Xenoblade 2 has a different vibe because of the whole fan service and the more anime style. So I was actually watching a live stream recently, and there are a lot of scenes that I understand as comedic scenes that when I was actually playing the game, I found them quite fun. I was just like, having a laugh. And I don't know if this is something more related to the West, but there was this streamer that I saw playing, and she got quite uncomfortable with some of these scenes, like the one where Rex is sleeping and Mifra is in front of him, and there's this whole thing where she goes crazy and start to throwing things at him, and
Yeah.
there are some very strange camera angles on the female characters, and sometimes I see a live stream and the person gets really uncomfortable, and in other times, which I found even worse, is a very serious scene is happening and the person start to laugh because there's a camera angle that is a little strange,
Questionable. Yeah.
questionable, right? And that was my biggest issue, because sometimes I see people really saying, oh, that's not a big issue. I think people who are complaining about that are wrong and all of that. But I actually get the point that I don't think Xenoblade needs that much of fan service, you know? I think the story is so strong, the characters are so strong that sometimes you can actually, the connection that the person playing with that character, you can kind of prejudice that if you make a character not looking in a certain way or look in a way that really feels a little out of place in the rest of the game. Because Pyra and Mifra, I think they are some of my favorite characters from the Xeno series. And I see a lot of people not taking them too seriously because of their design. And I just find that to be sad, because I think a lot of people could enjoy the game otherwise.
Yep, I 100% agree with you. Mithra is probably my second favorite character in the series, and it's the same thing. I think that the fan service in Xenoblade 2, it's definitely there. It's definitely way more than was in the first game or X, which is its own sort of problem where it wasn't exactly what fans of the other games were expecting.
Yeah.
I don't think it is inherently a bad thing. I just don't think it was implemented in the best way in 2.
I agree.
Because like you said, in cutscenes that are supposed to have a serious tone, if you suddenly see certain fancy bits of characters coming into view, it's going to break up the tone of the game, and that happens constantly throughout. More than that, the other thing you mentioned is online discussion. The game presents itself in a certain way, despite the serious and tone that it has, and the like how it talks about philosophy and like genuinely good themes. It still presents itself with these characters being overly sexualized, and that creates an impression that people have of the game, which is a shame because it is so much more than that.
Totally. It's really curious to watch people play sometimes, because at the beginning of the game they are kind of laughing, but at every scene, like the first scene where Pyra asks Rex to touch her chest, people go completely like, oh my god, people completely stop to pay attention in the game. And but as the game progresses, I think from chapter 5 on, the games get really serious and start.
It kind of stops that.
It's and I start to think sometimes maybe the game could use more of that in the first chapters. I mean, I was thinking about that some of these days. There are a lot of fillers in Xenoblade 2 on the beginning of some chapters. The beginning of chapter 3 has a quest of you getting the ship for the uncle of Tora. The beginning of chapter 4, I guess, has a filler with
the kids.
Kids. And to be completely honest, those moments don't add anything to the game, in my opinion. And the game is already very, very big. And these moments simply disappear from chapter 5 on, I think, on chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so I really think that these moments could be more developed in the game, or really just cut out, because I don't think they add a lot.
Yeah, one way or the other, it would have been either better to try and make that more of a recurring element, but if not, they do kind of get in the way.
Yeah, true. Now, alright, we talked a lot about the first Xenoblade, the second Xenoblade. I think we also talked about how they are connected in general, and the thematics and specifics of each of their games. With that in mind, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was announced, and I think we were...
yes.
I think we were all very excited with the game. And not only was announced, but it's coming earlier than we thought, because initially it was going to come out in September, and now it's coming out in July.
Monolith Soft is just crazy.
Crazy. I mean, there's one, like, 5% of me is worried, because I think, what if it's another Xenoblade Chronicles 2 situation where Nintendo is really impressing them to release the game? But I don't think they would do that, because it's not necessary, to be honest. Nintendo has a lot of games on schedule, and they do not need to make something like that at the moment. I think the game is really ready. They are just going to launch. And Takahashi said that the story of this game was being planned since the Xenoblade 2, I guess, since the beginning of development of Xenoblade 2.
1. Yeah. Well, I think since after 1, he said he pictured the visual of the Rhine Titan and the Bakana sword.
Yeah, and this sounds completely crazy to me, because here's the thing with Takahashi. He's been struggling with his concepts for a while now. I don't know if you know the story of Xenogears and Xenosaga, but Xenogears, I finished Xenogears. It's a fantastic game. I really recommend the game. And Xenogears is like, I think, the 4th part of a 6-part story, something like that. So he had this whole story in his head, and he only actually made one game and a book, Perfect Works. And from what I gather, in this book, there's a lot of info about that world. And then we had Xenosaga. And at the time of Xenosaga, I never finished Xenosaga. I tried to play the first one, but it's a really slow game, so I have to actually commit it to it, and I plan to do it one day. And Xenosaga was planned to be a 6-part game. And I mean, if you are in the gaming world for a while, you know that it's kind of impossible to plan a 6-part story with continuous plots, because every time that you release a new game, less people are buying, and more people are afraid of not understanding the story because they did not play the other ones. It's not like a movie.
They don't want to jump in on the fourth game or whatever.
Exactly. It's not like a movie or a series where people can actually get to the story a couple of days just watching some of the previous movies, some of the previous episodes. So I think he realized at the time that it would be kind of impossible to do something like that. And now with Xenoblade, he's being managed to do that in a clever way, where he's not actually connecting in a direct way, but in an indirect way. And with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I think that the story will culminate in something amazing. And at the same time, the game will still work as a standalone story, because he said that. And he also said that about 2, and it was true. Like, you can enjoy Xenoblade 2 without playing 1. So I think the same thing will happen here, even though there are even characters returning, it seems, with Nia and Melia. So I'm curious, how are your opinions about the game so far and your expectations about the story?
So, I am just ecstatic over what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
I'm super happy over what they've shown. It's a really well done, where, like you said, they're fusing elements from both Xenoblade 1 and 2, but they're just putting enough of a twist on it to be its own independent thing, which is just amazing. It's great that people are going to be able to start with 3 and still get a full experience. I'm super interested in what they are bringing from those 2 games, though. There's so many elements that just make you ask, like, how is this even happening?
Yeah.
What is even at work here? Like, the biggest thing for me is the mysterious giant, as I think what they've been calling him. I've been calling him Mr. Wild Ride, the big red guy.
Yeah, I know who it is.
So he mentions the Passage of Fate, which is such a huge element of Xenoblade 1's story, because it's something brought up by Alvis and Zanza, pretty much exclusively. And I think it's only brought up by those 2. It's not even in Xenoblade 2. But the use of that specific phrase is like, what is happening here? Is Alvis influencing the story of Xenoblade 3? Is Zanza back somehow? Like, it's insane. Stuff like that, stuff like Melia and Nia returning. There's so much here that I can't wait to actually dive into.
Yeah, I mean, it's really for us who have been so invested in that story to actually see then so many things of past games appearing here. It's really interesting that about the Passage of Fate. I heard some people talking about that in the internet. I didn't immediately grab it, but actually people was talking. I can clearly hear in Adam's Howden voice saying as Zanza, the Passage of Fate.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see how because it seems that it is the world of the end of Xenoblade 2, I guess. Where you I don't know.
it's hard to tell, yeah.
Because I have the impression that will be just one huge mass form like Xenoblade 1, not like Xenoblade 2 where have these separated titans. So everything that we see right now is a giant sword in Uriah, which is basically the box art of the second game and the first game together, which already says a lot. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And a lot of questions. Why Uriah is like that? Why the sword? Did the sword just like fell into his head and made this, or a titan actually attacked it?
Because Uriah should also be stuck to the landmass at the end of Xenoblade 2. So why is it like out? And what's the deal with like there's that one scene in the second trailer where we see Noah as a kid and like time is frozen and a planet is like crashing into his planet? Yeah. Like, is that when the worlds merged? Like, what is happening?
What is going on? I mean,
like, is it tied to the future connected portals with like the Fog King?
It's weird because the Fog King seems to be like really at the game. It seems to be hinting at future games like Future Connected and all of that stuff. But I don't see how they can actually connect. I mean, what will happen to make the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 be together? Is the worlds at the end of Xenoblade 2 the same world that Chuk creates at the end of Xenoblade 1? Would that make sense? Or we have to make a portal or something happening to actually make that connection? There's something that I'm very curious. I remember that at the end of Xenoblade 1 really set up for a sequel. I was the final sentences that Chuk says. He says something along the lines of meeting different peoples from different places and knowing the boundaries of the world. So I wonder if in that world that he is, he can reach another places. He can actually go to where Xenoblade 2 ends. It's really
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm leaning more towards a Xenoblade, the worlds merging together. Well, them not being merged together at the end of the respective games, and then something happened in between that and Xenoblade 3, and then they just kind of popped together somehow. It's interesting.
That would make the most sense because, I mean, you can start the game without knowing, let's say that you never played Xenoblade 1 and 2. You start the game without knowing that the worlds have merged, and then, I don't know, by the end of the story, there's a huge cutscene that can explain everything that happened. I won't doubt if something like that happens. And everything that happened, and it I don't know, because here's the thing. This is still Zanza's world, right? I mean, I don't
Maybe,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. Because a lot of people say, oh, I hope Zanza doesn't appear again. But I don't know. I think he has to appear somehow.
Yeah, Klaus is arguably the main character of the series, right? Like,
yeah.
He is the focus. Without him, none of the events of either game would have even come close to happening.
True.
Him showing up in 3 would be odd because, I mean, how? But at the same time, it would make some amount of like thematic sense.
And not only him, but I think the conduit has to return somehow. Because if the words of Xenoblade 1 and 2 really connected, I think the conduit has to have something related to that. Like the power that do this have to be related to the conduit somehow, but I don't know who would do that or somehow.
Yeah.
And there's also
similarly. I was gonna say similarly. Alvis should still be there.
Yeah.
Ira and Mithra should still be there.
Yeah.
They have to be incredibly important to what's going on. Like, if they are not at the center of the events of Xenoblade 3, there should be an explanation why they are not at the center of the events, because they are just that relevant to the story.
Totally. And, well, we have the elephant in the room, which is Melia and Nia. Which they are clearly in the game. I think it was already confirmed by the subtitles in one of the trailers. It appears like Melia and Nia. And what happened? Why they are in such a position right now? We know that they are like, they can have 100 years because Nia is a flesh eater and Melia is a hyentia, so they can live a lot. But it's curious to see then in that context. I mean, those characters... Melia, okay, because she's an empress.
Yeah, she's an empress.
I can totally see her in that position. But Nia,
what happened? What's
the cat girl.
Yeah.
And what's the relation of Nia and Mio? That's another question, because Mio really seems some related to her, because the core crystal is like the same. And she's also a cat girl. She's also Welsh, if I'm not mistaken, for her VA. So it's really curious. There was a post in the Xenoblade's Japanese Twitter where they said that all the characters could materialize their weapons, and that to me sounds a lot like blades. So I'm wondering if all the characters are flesh eaters, or if somehow they have blade cells. I don't know.
Yeah, so here's my theory on that. We've seen one of the posts, I think it was a GameStop, it was a GameStop description that was later removed, confirms what is kind of hinted at in the trailers, which is that people have a limited lifespan.
Oh, I see that.
Specifically,
I saw that.
Soldiers only have 10 years to live. What we see with all of the soldiers so far is they all have that sort of tattoo on them.
Yeah.
More than that, we see that the soldiers, when they're young, have a tattoo that's mostly red, and the older they get, like the closer they get to that 10-year time limit, it turns gray. So already I think that that's supposed to be an indicator of, this is how much time they have left.
Yeah.
More than that, because it's all the soldiers that get the tattoo, my guess is that is tied to getting their special abilities. I think that's... them getting that sort of tattoo is what gives them the ability to manifest
the price
the blade.
To pay.
Yeah.
They pay with their lives.
It's also very interesting because if you look at the tattoo, it's vaguely shaped like the conduit.
Oh god.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really Xenoblade-y. and that's probably something kind of shady behind that, probably. And there's a bigger force behind those two countries fighting, which is something that would make a lot of sense. And that is also really similar to the plots of Xenogears. So it would make a lot of sense for Takahashi to be revisiting that. And
I actually have a theory on that, which I think is pretty well.
Go on. I want to hear it.
Yeah. So in the second trailer, there's a point where we see the Uni and Taion Ouroboros form, like in gameplay, and one of their arts has a Mobius up effect. My guess is that Mobius is a new enemy type, and Mobius up just means that it does more damage to Mobius enemies. The thing is, what is a Mobius enemy? And so my guess is that because Mobius is tied to the Mobius strip, like that whole funky shape that's also in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and that the Mobius strip is it's usually represented in that 8 shape, which sort of looks like an infinity. It's tied to the Ouroboros thematically in that they're both kind of representative of a cycle and of eternity. More than that, you see that Mr. Wild Ride has an infinity shape in his sort of core. So I think that he is one of those Mobius enemies or things, whatever they are. My guess is that because Van Damme talks about the will of Ouroboros, there's an opposite entity, which is Mobius, and they're the ones causing all of this and kind of opposing them, and Mr. Wild Ride is one of them, kind of like how Metal Face was one of the face Mechon you encounter at the start of Xenoblade 1.
So in that case, Mr. Wild Ride wouldn't be a Ouroboros. He would be a...
He would be a Mobius.
All right.
Yeah,
that would make sense. And it seems like something like an outer force who's like this supernatural, something related to that really affects the whole thing. That's really interesting. Yeah, they talk about a lot about the Ouroboros during that trailer.
Yeah, it's interesting because nothing that we've seen of the Ouroboros is inherently bad, and yet like I think it's Melanie and Nia especially keep talking about how like Ouroboros abhors this world or how it has to be destroyed and stuff.
Yeah.
Which also brings up the question, like, are they being brainwashed? Because we kind of see Ethel.
I don't want to fight Nia. Normalia.
Yeah, is that why they're wearing masks though? Is it to cover up like the red eye that shows they're being brainwashed?
True. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah, we know that Takahashi likes to humanize his villains, right? We know that by the end of the game, we will end up feeling sorry for everyone for some reason. I mean, sometimes I watch the ending of Xenoblade 1, and there's this whole line of, "Oh, but Sansa just wanted friendship," and I'm like, what?
He was lonely.
He really wanted friendship. Why? But it's interesting because it seems like he always has this desire to humanize his villains, and I love that. I think in Xenoblade 2 with Torna, I think he does that in an amazing way with Jin and Malus.
Oh my god, yeah.
At the end of the game, you can actually see like they are just like us. It's like another group of people who are together and trying to do this, and it's really cool to see that.
Even Malus is like...
even Malus. When Malus was dying, I was sad and was like, what? Of course, the sad music of Xenoblade 2 is really strong.
It helps.
Yeah. So that's gonna be a huge point. But Xenoblade 2 so far seems to be like in the same department of the stories that we have heard so far with Xenoblade 1 and 2, and with that probably more mature story, a little more on the line with what Xenogears did, it makes me really excited. Not that I didn't like Xenoblade 2 with the more lighthearted approach at the beginning of the game, but I was craving for something like that. So I wanted something like that, a little more mature, because I think Takahashi can really tell good stories like that. Xenogears gets really, really dark, so if he can achieve something at least at the level of that would be really cool to see. And
even the game's ratings have been like, I think this game has a higher rating in terms of the stuff that's showing than the past games as well.
Yeah, true. I think I saw something in some country they put a stamp of horror in the game, which is something interesting to see how they develop.
Wonder what that...
There's something a little silly with those games. The first Xenoblades had blood, and I think it was really well used because they really used bloods in scenes where it really showed like how Metal Face was this bad guy who did terrible things and was kind of sadistic, you know? It really helped to sell the character. And on Xenoblade 2, there are a lot of moments where there should be blood, but you see like Nintendo's going, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You shouldn't.
Rex being stabbed, or like Vandam
exactly.
stabbing himself to like use his abilities.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I think it's kind of silly to take out something like that. I think that Xenoblade 2 probably won't have blood, but probably some of similar to Xenoblade 2, just giving the impression, which is okay, it works too.
I think it mentioned actually it had blood in the rating. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah,
but...
I'm not sure. Yeah, it would be interesting to see something. There's some. I'm remembering now some flashbacks. By the end of Xenoblade 2, you start to hear more about the story of Amalthus, of Jean, and there are some really gruesome scenes. There's a scene where the Laura is almost killed by her. I don't know if it's her father-in-law. I don't know. It's the guy who's taking care of her.
It's never said, but yeah.
Yeah, he literally tries to kill a kid of 10 years old, and then Jin cuts his arm off. A lot of crazy stuff starts to happen.
Even without blood, it's a pretty... It tackles some like pretty dark stuff. Like Amalthus with the... there's that one soldier that he saves that ends up like killing a kid, and that's what makes
Amalthus, that scene gives me
like,
the chills.
Like, there's a lot that's dark even without blood. So I think they're definitely capable of telling whether they are able to put more like gory elements or whatnot. They're going to be able to tell the story they want to tell, I think.
Yeah, true. I think that's not gonna stop in it, and it's nice that Nintendo actually gives them that freedom to tell the story that they want. I think I have the impression that Nintendo really respects Monolith Soft a lot and respect Takahashi and his vision and everything that he does, because as I said in the past, even if the games doesn't sell that well, they always give the chance for him to develop what he wants, to develop a new game, and that's amazing for us who really love those two games.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that they would position the game as like an end of direct announcement multiple times. Like the first time that happened with the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition announcement, I was incredibly surprised because it's like you said, like Xenoblade doesn't sell that well. Like for an RPG, it sells pretty well, but compared to like a Mario or Splatoon or whatever else, like it's not at that level.
Not even close.
And yet they're still attributing that much importance that like they think they can put it at the end of a direct and it's going to get a whole bunch of people excited. Which it does, but like still, that's really cool to see.
Not only that, but the investment behind Xenoblade. Xenoblade has an orchestral soundtrack. I'm talking about the second game, of more than 100 songs with full orchestral music. That, I mean, Pokemon don't have something like that. And the motion capture in the cutscenes is so amazing. Of course, the problem with that is that the cutscenes that doesn't have motion capture look terrible, but the ones that actually have,
it's obvious.
look amazing. And I hope that Xenoblade 3 they are able to create a system of the cutscenes with no motion capture looking a little better, because some of in Xenoblade 2 there are some really rough cutscenes where like when a character moves his face, you can see like a mouse pulling the model and moving his face. Like it's really robotic.
Yeah, I mean what we've seen of 3 so far does look really good in terms of just the animations and visuals. Definitely like even better than what they did in Definitive Edition, but hopefully like you said, they'll stick through. We won't get too many oddly robotic cutscenes.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Xenoblade 1, there was these cutscenes, but they were like those like Zelda cutscenes where you actually press for the dialogue to progress. And in those cutscenes, my brain is like, okay, I can understand that this is not. I guess I actually developed cutscene, and not only that, but the voice acting on the first game could sell any scene, even if it was like a visual novel. I would be very into that because the voice action did amazing work. But that's another question. So far, I've liked the voice acting on 3. I really hope that they took into consideration the problems with 2, and mostly because I think my biggest problem with the voice acting on 2 is not actually on the voice acting, but on the lip sync because there are a lot of times where
Yeah.
the character is like shouting and the voice acting is saying something like normally.
Yeah, it's a really bad moment. I think Zeke's introduction in the game
Yeah.
is when I noticed it the most. But yeah, I I have some faith there because I feel like Xenoblade 2 was rushed and they understood that it was a bit rushed in that regard. And what we saw of Torna, even just Torna, which was not long after, and then later with Future Connected, like they didn't really have those problems as much.
Yeah.
So I feel like, assuming that Xenoblade 3 isn't rushed, which I'm hoping it isn't, I don't think it is. I feel like the voice acting will probably be fine. The lip syncing probably won't be too bad. And I think the voice direction is definitely going to be a step up from 2.
Yeah, I rewatched the trailers, trying to pay attention at the most emotional moments, because the problem with the trailer is that they are using voices from different moments of what they are showing.
Clips.
Yeah, but there are moments that I can really see that there's some good work of voice action going on there. There's a moment where Lance and Senna are shouting for Mio and Noah, and you can actually feel the emotion.
Oh, that's so good.
I mean, yeah, there are some great moments already there, so I'm really hopeful for that too. And also in that department, I feel watching those trailers on 3 that Monolith Soft clearly is taking feedback into consideration. It feels like they are taking exactly what we love the most from 1, exactly what we love the most from 2, and creating the best experience possible. You can see that the fan service is not at the same level, even though there are some characters that, anime characters normally.
Yeah, they're attractive.
Yeah, they're attractive.
Yeah, it's not to the extent of like what 2 did with its main characters.
Exactly. And there are the combat system. I don't know how widespread that is, but in general, for people who played both games, people in general like the combat system of 2 a little bit more. If people actually get to understand that, and because I think the problem with that game was more of the tutorials than the actual combat system. So I hope that they make better tutorials, and I get the impression that they are using what they created on Xenoblade 2 and making some differences in general. I see that there are no more blade combos probably, but they are building that Ouroboros mechanic. They are retaining the buttons with each art, which I love. I think it's way more easy to use each art. The character doesn't attack when it moves, but it doesn't get super slow like 2.
Yes, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, that's a huge
thing. That was such a big thing of 2's combat, is that it was so slow.
Exactly.
And in 3, not only does it look like the natural movement is faster, but you also have like that little dash mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, the combat of 2 gets way faster when you start to do that stuff where you move the analog to cancel the attack and getting back to the first attack, but I don't know if that was really intended, so maybe a problem. And
yeah, some parts of it probably, but yeah.
But I'm really curious. I know that Monolith Soft can create a combat system that feels amazing, and I really hope that in general it's just a good system like 1 and 2, because I love both, to be honest. I prefer 2, but when I play 1 I have so much fun. It's a different rhythm, but it still is so much fun to play. So yeah, I'm hopeful for the combat too.
Yeah, I really like that how they're kind of fusing both systems. Like, we see in the trailer that there's both daze and launch as mechanics after topple.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I wonder how exactly that's going to work. If, like, daze maybe leaves them on the ground longer, but launch and smash gives you items, and that's how they balance it out. There's stuff like how it looks like characters from Kevis have circles to represent their arts, like in Xenoblade 1. The characters from Agnes have diamonds, like in Xenoblade 2.
Oh, interesting.
There's like fusion arts, which is like almost seems like it's literally combining arts from Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, and that's like using both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
And then you have like Ouroboros forms, which is a whole new element tacked on to make it feel fresh and unique.
Yeah. I think it's probably the main mechanic that they will present during the game, that it works both on the story, on the gameplay department. I
think it's honestly in the game from like almost the very beginning. You see in there's characters. The main 6 characters have 2 different uniforms that you see during the trailers. They have like one war uniform, and then they have their regular like outfit. And the scene where they encounter the like big giant, they still have their war outfits on. So, and that's when Mio and Noah use Ouroboros for the first time. So that's gotta be pretty early on that shows up for the first time.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that because to me it seems that in this game you get the whole party really soon. It feels to me because
Yeah.
in Xenoblade 2 it takes a while. It takes a lot actually. I mean,
It's like half the game, I guess.
yeah, for the whole party, but even at some points like chapter 2, which chapter 2 is like 5-7 hours into the game, you are like with 2 party members and then Nia gets you lost Nia and then Tora and you still have only 2. It takes a while to actually get 3 to make a tanker, a healer, and an attacker.
Yeah.
So I get the impression that here it will be really soon because those characters are all together. Probably you will start like with Noah and his friends and then you eventually get to meet the others. I was interested maybe if they could do like something with 2 different perspectives. You start playing with Noah and his side and then you go with Mio and then they come together eventually. That would be interesting because we never saw something like that in a Xenoblade game.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like the big question is, are they going to start in the middle of that battle that we see in the trailers, or is it going to be a little bit before that?
Yeah, I mean that battle seems to be really early to me, but I think maybe it will be the end of that chapter if you have a similar chapter because I think the game will start. All the first Xenoblade also starts with a very peaceful moment. Xenoblade 1 and 2, right? They start very peaceful with the character talking and all of that stuff.
Technically, Xenoblade 1 starts with the Sword Valley fight.
Yeah. Eventually, you'll get to that. It's really fast.
Yeah, it's still like that's the first 20 minutes, and then after that, you're right. It's like a few hours of fairly peaceful.
Oh
gameplay.
yeah, no, I understand what you're talking about. The scene with Dunban, Dixon, and Monkar. All right,
Yeah.
I was forgetting about that. True.
I mean, it's a pretty small part, so you're right in that it is for the most part the start of the game is like the very calm. Which, if we start in the middle of a war in Xenoblade 3, it would be pretty different.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's weird because when you start Xenoblade 2, the first thing that you do is combat. So one, 2, right, 1, 2, yes, because of the war. So yeah, I mean, maybe they will, but it can be also just a small enemy like 2 where you found on the ground.
My biggest hope for that is because they switch from the war outfits into the regular outfits and we see them like put on the jackets of other characters.
Yeah.
I really hope we're going to get like appearance customization in 3.
Oh yeah.
more than what we had in 2, because it is kind of a shame that like 2 didn't really have that outside of like the challenge mode.
I mean,
Ox cores.
We saw that when you change classes,
Yes.
there's a specific outfit for each class, right?
Yes.
So with that, I would imagine that you probably can't customize more than that. I mean, you probably could customize the class outfit, right? That would make sense maybe. But I don't know.
Right. There is one part, because they've been showing a whole bunch of clips on the official Japanese Twitter. There is one clip they showed where both Noah and Mio are an attacker, like they have the same class.
Yeah.
And Noah has his like normal outfit, but Mio also has her normal outfit. She doesn't have Noah's jacket. So I wonder if that's just because they both have the same class, Noah gets to keep his jacket.
I mean,
he doesn't have to give it to her. Or if it's like, yeah.
I would like to have the option of choosing the outfits and not this to be tied to the class, because it's a really weird. It feels like the classes are like
they just give each other their jackets.
Like what the outfit has to do with the skills.
It is funny.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they'll develop that. I hope there's more customization than 2 also. I mean, they could make something similar to what 2 did with the DLC, where you have those items that change the whole character's outfits or the colors or something like that. It would also be
it doesn't necessarily need like individual armor pieces like one. I like some kind. Like giving people the option to like give people to give characters their wartime outfits instead of like their regular. So I don't know, that'd just be nice.
It's sad because the first Xenoblade, I think it's a game of the Wii era, and I think the outfits in general in this game are really not so great. Not even the main outfits.
It depends.
Yeah. There are some great, but there are many weird ones. And I really would like to see a more modern Xenoblade with that approach, where you could see like they could hire Masatsuki Saito, which is the one making the characters. They could he could make a lot of different outfits for the same characters, which would be a lot of fun to actually see. Actually, I love the characters in these games. In this game,
Yes.
I think all of them, the design is just amazing. I really liked what I've seen so far.
It's super interesting how they've gone for like that slightly more modern looking style compared to what we had in like 2, for instance. Like these are maybe, I guess, a little bit more grounded in the sense that, you know, they're wearing like pants and like jackets and stuff.
It looks more like
cool.
Definitive Edition, I guess. The
Kind of, yeah.
Xenoblade Definitive Edition, which is it still is very anime, but it has, like you said, a more grounded look in general.
Yeah, like you look at the future connected designs for Shulk and Melia. Those are pretty close to what we're getting in 3.
It feels really similar. I think a lot of people forget one of the reasons why Xenoblade 2 is so over the top, at least I have this in my mind, is that Xenoblade Chronicles X was really bland in the character design. Like, most of the characters in Xenoblade X, they look very similar, like changing just the color of the hair or the hairstyle. And I think there's a justification for that on the story, because of the end of the day, they are all robots, you could say. So, yeah, they are kind of similar. But the cutscenes in that game, I think they don't express themselves so hard, you know? And then you have Xenoblade 2, where those characters have so many emotions on their faces. You have the lips trembling, the eyes moving, and I think one of the reasons why that was that they really wanted to do something a little more expressive, and maybe they've gone too far in some places. But
yeah, it's technically, you could argue it's an overcorrection.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's interesting in its own regard, because it means that like Monolith does pay attention to feedback. Like characters are too robotic, literally, in X, so they make them very expressive in 2, and in 2 maybe they went a little bit too far, so they dial it back in 3. Like
exactly, I think that's exactly they are right now. They are finding the right spot for that. So, and I really like how the characters seem to be. I don't know if their age was already revealed, but I think they have something. What is their age?
So if I remember correctly, all of the main 5 except for Mio are 18, and Mio is 19.
Great. Okay, because I think that this is more or less in line with the first Xenoblade and with Xenogears. I think usually if you have mature protagonists, the story will end up being more mature. Even though I love a coming-of-age story like Rex, but it also avoids some of strange scenes that Japanese people sometimes puts in the game, because there's this culture of treating kids like people, like treating kids as protagonists who really can think for themselves and can really make a lot of stuff, and I think that's awesome. That's, as a kid, I love to see those protagonists. But I think as a change of pace, is also nice to have more mature characters in a story like this. I think it can end up being really great.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, the game looks great on the gameplay, the visuals, exploration, the music. I'm really excited for the music.
Oh, I've listened to that second trailer so many times just to hear that song.
I want to thank you, some musicians on the internet, that they managed to get the whole song and put on a music app to simulate every instrument and recreate the song, and it just sounds amazing. That's probably the counter-attack engage the enemy of that game.
Did you in the second trailer, you can actually hear near the end, there's a part where it plays the tune of both of those themes, which is just so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Again, it's like taking elements from both, but then making something new from it. Like, I love it so much.
The soundtrack is mainly directed by Mitsuda, which he made all the Xeno games except one. And we also have Kenji Hiramatsu and Ace Plus, which I call those guys the hype guys, because they make the best musics, like Gore Plains, like more
the battle themes and stuff.
Like Counterattack. So they really make the hype music, and I know that Mitsuda will make the more soothing, more calming music. And I love the Xenoblade soundtrack. I love that they go that far for the game.
Yeah, I have no concerns about the game's music being good.
Yeah.
That is pretty much set in stone.
I know people who don't like the game, who never play it, but frequently listen to the soundtrack. It's a really nice way to sell the game. So, wow, we talked a lot. I think we covered a lot of ground here. There is something specific that you want to talk that we didn't mention, something that you want to add about anything, about the Xeno series, about 1, 2, or 3?
I mean, honestly, there's so many details in this trailer that to talk about. Like that would just take too long to talk about everything. But things like
Would be here all
how
day.
Van Damme is, yeah, Van Damme's a Van Damme, but not the Van Damme. Or, like-
Guernica, yeah.
Yes, yeah, which is also interesting because that's a reference to like Picasso's anti-war painting, which is pretty on the nose because there's the whole two wars thing going on.
Yeah.
There's stuff like how the giant mechs are like look like face mechon.
True.
The whole stuff with like the eyes being controlled is interesting because it like parallels Ouroboros, where like one person has a right eye that's red and the other has a left eye.
Yeah.
I guess one thing to mention, one thing that could possibly be a future connected reference is when we see the characters through Ethel's perspective, they look kind of foggy.
Oh, I saw
Like
that. Yeah.
weird foggy monsters, which could be something to do with the Fog King. Like maybe the Fog King is tied to whatever the big bad evil thing is, maybe Mobius, and that's what's like affecting it.
Yeah.
Maybe
it
like
looks
them
really similar.
controlling people's mind is kind of how like the fog beasts ended up aggroing other enemies. Like it controls their mind in that way.
Yeah, and it's how they see them, and that's why, because she called them
Yeah.
monsters, right? Yeah, I think
Yes,
at the
she
beginning.
did.
So it's really, and we also saw from another scene that Monolith released on Twitter that Ethel as a kid, or
Yes.
fighting with Noah and other. So it seems like she was from their teens. They were the.
I'm so excited for her to be the Dunban or Morag of this game, and I
Oh,
really
it
hope
would
she
be
doesn't
nice.
suffer a tragic mentor death.
Oh, that's the problem with Xenoblade. You never know who's going to die.
Yes. Yeah. It is very interesting how
someone
we've got,
has to
like, that
die
whole-
in the at least at the first 15 hours. Someone will die. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. It is interesting how we have that whole like 7 party member setup.
Yeah.
We've seen only a few of them. I think most of them have been from Kevis. Like we saw a High Entia party member and a Machina party member. It'll be interesting to see if we have a balance between those and like the Gormati. And hopefully we have like Ethel as one of them. And maybe like the other samurai guy that was in a mech. The guy that had the spear.
Yeah.
I think his name was Kamaravi.
And that scene with that guy, he was on a full-on mecha. I think it was
Yes,
like
which is like-
gigantic.
I mean, yeah. That's such a Monolith soft thing, and it
Totally.
is just awesome.
I remember I was playing, the first time I played Xenoblade 2 was my first Xenoblade, and I was like, at the first time that a mecha appeared, I was like, why there are mechas in this game? What's the deal? What's related? Because in that game the mechas are like, you'll not control them, you never actually use them. They're like there, and I'm like, why there are mecha? And now that I've played the whole series, I'm like, okay, where's the mecha? I want to see the mecha. Like it's my whole expectation for this thing.
Yeah. It's interesting. We see, I think it's in the first trailer. We see like you controlling a boat and moving around like an ocean.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we're going to get more of that, like maybe some Skell style stuff where we're actually controlling like a mecha vehicle that can like fly or stuff like that. Like that would be very interesting.
Yeah, that would be very interesting because I'm curious to see, because usually with Xenoblade games, of course, there's a lot of exploration, but you can also rely on skip travel very easily. So I'm not sure how exactly it will be useful. Maybe you can access areas that you can access by feet, or maybe, as you said, you can transform into a mecha or something like that, and it will be fantastic, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And I see some people were commenting that every time that we see gameplay, you can see that the scenarios in the background are really big, like really expensive, and people are saying, oh, this is like Xenoblade Chronicles X. But looking more closely in some trailers, I can see some areas that are clearly not accessible. They're like, like the top of a Titan or some place that you couldn't fly to go there because it doesn't seem to be fully modeled, And I could be mistaken, but that's the impression that I got from most of the areas that I saw. So I think it will be more in line with the first and the second Xenoblade.
I would not expect it to be fully open world.
Yeah.
It might be bigger than what we've seen in Xenoblade 1 and 2, but I would assume it's still going to be an open area setup as opposed to an open world setup.
Yeah.
If it isn't, and it is fully open world, that would be amazing. I'm not going to bet on that, though. And I mean, the past games have done fantastic with that kind of open area setup, so there's not really a strict need for it to be open
Yeah,
world.
it's never something that I actually missed. Like, oh, I wish this was more open, because every time that I'm playing, I'm also at an area that is so big, so crazy. So it's never something that I actually missed in the numbered Xenoblade games. Something interesting, but for me, it's already fantastic to see they returning to the concept of a single mass area. Maybe you are in a place and you can see another place like the first Xenoblade, because I think that's
Yes.
one of the most Xenoblade moments, which is you are in a Titan and you are seeing another Titan in the distance, or you're seeing another place that you've been through.
Yeah.
Even Xenoblade
That's
2, at the end of Xenoblade 2, when the war goes all out and you see all those Titans come together, it's so amazing.
yeah. Yeah, that's probably one of the things I like the most about Xenoblade 1 that I don't feel 2 did badly, it just does different, is I
Yeah,
love how everything feels so interconnected in one. Like you can tell you're going from like the leg to the waist to the back, whatever, and like down the arm onto the sword that's in the hand, stuff like that. And two's good. It has those moments like you said where you can see other titans from the world tree and whatnot, but for the most part, a lot of them feel kind of disconnected because you're just traveling from one to another by like a boat or
totally.
something.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing, but I would really, it would make me really happy if 3 had that kind of more of those like Xenoblade 1 moments or World Tree moments where you see like this is where we're going and you can tell the path you're taking to get there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, for a long time I was defending the approach of Xenoblade 2 because I felt that the world with Xenoblade 2 was more expensive. Like, it was so big that I couldn't explore it. It was like there was part that I didn't know, there was these different nations, and there was the whole politics that Xenoblade 2 has with Uriah and Moradin and that whole
Yes.
stuff that I really like it. And my biggest problem with the approach that Xenoblade 1 followed was that although Bionis is amazing, Mechanis is terrible for me. Because like there's this whole part of the game after you go to the Machina village that you have to climb the Mechanis. And to me it's a really low on the game because you just go to those areas that really feel similar. All the areas in the Mechanis, I think the most interesting would be Agni-Rata, which is the capital.
Super short, yeah.
Yeah. So my only problem is that, but at the
That's
same
fair.
time, it was so fantastic to explore, to have this feeling of actually climbing a Titan. You knew where you were, you have this whole feeling of the places that you were exploring. So I love both approaches, and I'm happy to see the approach with Xenoblade 1 coming back, and now even more expanded. Now that they have more hardware to work on, they have more time to work on, probably they have more money and everything else. So I'm really excited to see the world in that game because so far all the scenes that we saw, we can't really grasp how this Titan or this landmass actually is from an outside look. We can't. I didn't understand yet how it work.
Yeah, there's no structure yet.
Yeah, but I mean, Uriah is in the box art, so I guess we'll be
Yep.
able to explore Uriah. Will it be the same of Xenoblade 2? How
Maybe.
would it be? Yeah, I mean, that's amazing to think of.
I think there's some gameplay clips where we see characters fighting in like a jungle, and I think some of the ones posted on Twitter you can see sort of like Fonsamima structures in the background.
Oh,
So that might
interesting.
be like
Cannot saw that.
exploring Raya. It's pretty it's not super obvious, but it kind of looks like that might be inside of Raya, so it could be that.
I was wondering maybe Uriah could be completely destroyed and the whole fauna is like dead, and that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it could be like the Tornin Titan in Mortha in
Yeah,
Xenoblade 2.
maybe something like that. Yeah. Oh man, really this game.
There's a lot.
I want to play this game immediately.
Oh, the wait is so hard, and they haven't even announced like the special editions yet, which I'm still waiting on.
Yeah. Oh man.
Uh,
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I mean, I was prepared to wait for September, but since they released that trailer, it's been
suddenly, yeah, it's just
July
a whole
became
lot less
so
time.
so fasted. Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, a whole lot less time to be playing other games before that comes out. If there's anything on their backlog, you gotta get through it quickly.
True. No, I'll be honest. Because you said in the podcast that you were finished Xenoblade 2, I decided to play a bit. And now I think
Nice.
I'm on the road to do that, but I'm not 100%. I think the first time that I played Xenoblade 2, I really did not pay attention to all the side stuff. So I really only did the main story, and because I was really anxious to know what's going to happen, so every time that I got to a point,
Right.
I continued to the other point. And then after that, I did a new game plus, but I also wasn't able to do a lot. And now I'm with this save on chapter 5, and I'm really going back and trying to do a lot of stuff, a lot of the side quests, a lot of the trying to complete some of the skill trees, making some merc missions, and I'm having a good time actually, because the world building is so amazing. It's so cool to see everything happening in the side quests. I'm really enjoying it so far. I don't know if I'll go
The side
100%.
Ah, that can be a little tough.
But I'll
Yeah,
do
the
a
side
lot.
quests are definitely a highlight. Those are definitely worth doing. They're definitely an improvement over what Xenoblade 1 did, where that
Oh
was
yeah,
very
for
much
sure.
generic style quests. It's nice to have these kind of like little storylines to each quest into, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do in 3. Especially
Oh
because
yeah.
also the quests in Torna were the fact that they were forced on you was kind of unfortunate, but the
Yeah.
entire the actual structure of them, where they really helped build out the world, was really well done.
I
How they
mean,
led into other quests and whatnot. So I'd like to see more of that in 3.
yeah, I can see why they did that, because it's a DLC and to give it a little more time and more content. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it can be a huge issue to have to make those stories. If they just want to experience these stories, to have this thing halting your progress is really not a nice thing. At the time, I was so excited to have more Xenoblade content that I completed everything that I could in the first try.
Yeah.
Now, that's an interesting question. I think we can end on that note. Maybe, will this game have a DLC like Torna? I really wanted to have it.
I mean, that would be great. It's hard to say whether, if we do have that style of DLC expansion, what would they cover? Because Torna was done since I think Takahashi originally wanted to put the story that was in Torna in
Yes,
between chapter 7 and 8 in Xenoblade 2. They
exactly.
couldn't fit that in because it was too much, and it broke the pace of those things too much, so they just relegated it to DLC. Since we don't know the story structure of 3, it's hard to tell what exactly is going to is there anything that they can do that would work as that kind of DLC expansion? We
Yeah,
don't know. But
go
it's
on.
worth saying that we got Future Connected in Definitive Edition,
Exactly.
which was the additional epilogue. We have Torna as an example of this additional DLC. We've seen other Nintendo games have things like this, like the Octo expansion or Age of Calamity had additional story DLC. Breath of the Wild as well. I feel like we might. It's very possible that we get some form of expansion pass with 3.
Yeah, I think you talk about Future Connected makes a lot of sense. And beyond that, although Torna seems to be something that made sense on that moment, I feel like they were actually happy with the results, because if you finish Xenoblade from beginning to end, you want to play Torna. You'll be interested in Torna. I mean, if you liked the story. So I don't know the attach rates, but I would guess that the attach rate of people who bought the game and then bought the DLC, it could be pretty something that makes them consider it. And let's not forget that the DLC for Xenoblade was quite expensive, if I'm not forgetting. It was
I,
$30. Yeah,
I think it was $30.
yeah. So usually
It
Nintendo
was a
makes
heck of a
20.
DLC though.
Yeah. So I mean, and they can use the same engine, the same. I mean, Monolith is so crazy that they actually almost made another game with new areas, new music, new scenes. But
Yeah, Future Connected is. Oh, I'm sorry. Torna is basically its own mini RPG. It's a nice little
yeah,
20-hour RPG to enjoy with
totally.
different mechanics and stuff.
But of course, they reuse assets, they reuse character models, of course. And so, I mean, it's not exactly like producing a new game. But there's a big difference between Torna and Future Connected. I think Torna was actually mostly produced by Takahashi very closely, and it is a story by Takahashi. Future Connect, I don't know exactly where I read, but Takahashi gave a lot of freedom to the newer writers and everyone else in the team to actually make the game and actually make the story. And Future Connected feels way less important than
Yeah,
Torna.
it ended up being not necessarily the huge like epic epilogue that people
Yeah.
necessarily want it to be, which is not, and,
Although it is fun.
it's a bit of a shame, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is fun. It's fun. It does provide a nice conclusion to Melia's character arc, which was very much appreciated.
True.
And it doesn't do everything great. Like, there's that one random Hyentia, I think Gelgar is his name, who's just kind of
Yeah.
shows up as a villain and is like not really the best character. But I think as like a small epilogue to Xenoblade 1, it worked.
And
I think it served its goal well enough in that regard.
yeah, I think also let's not forget that the budget for this remaster was really thin, and I think Takahashi said that they really did Future Connected because the team really wanted to do it, and they really were like doing the best that they could with what they had. So it was I think the goal was to be something a little more simple. Maybe the biggest mistake that they did was make a name Future Connected, because the name like implies a lot, and it is mostly a Melia focused story. Yeah, maybe it is connecting the future.
You could argue that if like the Fog King is relevant to 3, what Future Connected is that it's connecting the futures of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2.
Yeah.
Which, like, we have to see.
That's not unheard of in Xenoblade. Yeah. So I would not. I mean, one of the most amazing things is to play Xenoblade 2, then play Torna, and then replay Xenoblade 2, because in every scene that there's Jean, that there's Laura, Malus, it's so
Mythra
much
is made so much better.
Mythra's a different character. Because
like it is so difficult. Like Mythra's introduction in 2 is kind of harsh for a character because it plays her off as being just so abrasive.
So at tsundere and yeah,
but Torna gives her so much context. Like when you see what she actually had to deal with Torna, it's like, okay, I understand why you kind of like secluded yourself. Like it does so much, and like you said for Jen and Malice as well. Like it's a fantastic story expansion.
The whole trauma that Pyra and Mythra had is not explicitly shown in Xenoblade 2. So she is talking about the trauma, but you never actually feel it. And it makes a lot of more sense in Torna. And there's this scene that I never actually understood of Jean killing Fan Lanorn or Hayes. And when I rewatched that scene, I mean, he was like, it was killing him to see her being the servant of Amautas. The guy that made his life hell. So it made so much sense. He was,
and then as she died, like remembers him and thanks him. Like, oh my god, like
it's so much more powerful. When Takahashi said that Torna was actually to be in the game, I can totally see that, because it is true. It actually makes sense. And it's funny because even if Torna is not in the game, chapter 7 and 8 have a lot of flashbacks. So he still had a lot of story to tell. You can clearly see that. Yeah, I mean, those games have so much amazing story. It's kind of crazy. And I think that's one of the reasons why Nintendo gives it so much attention, because there's something that Nintendo doesn't have, is people being attached to the story and characters of their games. I mean, of course, people love Mario, people love Yoshi, but they do not love Mario because Mario has a whole arc of a whole story, a deep lore, exactly. And when you have the story connection, people can make fanfic, can make fan art, and I think the fandom is really strong, and is a public that maybe do not buy some of Nintendo's more casual games like Kirby, like Switch Sports, something like that, but they buy Xenoblade, and they add to the whole base of the Switch. So I think at the end of the day, Xenoblade ends up being a huge game for Nintendo, like Fire Emblem and other JRPGs that they produce sometimes also.
Yeah, it helps fill out that niche that they don't quite have. Like Zelda sort of makes a half step towards that, like being like a really big story game, but it doesn't take like that full approach. And Xenoblade really, it fills that like that little niche that people want of being like this huge big story thing that people really, really want to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, with Zelda, I think Nintendo is always trying to get out of the niche If you see Breath of the Wild is a game, I think Breath of the Wild is a little more accessible than past Zelda games because it gives you so much freedom, so much, and that's not a problem. I'm not saying that's a problem, but to fill the niche, I think Xenoblade is a game that consistently Monolith is always trying to make something more complex, more crazy, and it is enjoyable because they know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Nicholas, I think we talked a lot. Yeah, but I think this was a great conversation. We managed to cover a lot of ground, a lot of topics, and those games are so complex. Maybe before Xenoblade 3 launch, we can even do a part 2 if we can, if we find more topics to talk about it.
If there's another trailer and there's more stuff to discuss from that, I would be delighted to join.
Although I'm a little afraid because there's a point in where Nintendo will start to give us a lot of spoilers. So I'm a little afraid of the final trailers, but I will end up seeing a lot of them because it's just so good to see all those new moments.
It's too tempting.
Yeah. But that was it. Thank you so much who watched this discussion till the end. If you are a Xenoblade fan, consider subscribing to the channel because we will have more Xenoblade content here. Although it's not the only thing that we do, talk about Nintendo in general. And that was, don't forget to leave a like on this video also if you liked, and if you have any opinion on Xenoblade, if you disagree with us, if you agree with us, please leave a comment. We'll be happy to read whatever you write here and to have more conversations about the series because we love it so much. And that was basically it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!